think I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I work in the Marine Unit of the Hamilton, Ontario Police Force. Just last night, about an hour after sunset, my partner, Ron, and I saw something in the sky while on patrol. It looked like a meteor, and it looked like it was coming straight for the lake. We thought it was going to hit our small armored motorboat for a second, but it passed over our heads and slammed into the water a couple kilometers away. The light from the burning rock disappeared for a moment, but then, strangely enough, it resurfaced. We were halfway through turning around when a shock wave traveling quickly along the surface of the water slapped the side of our boat, rocking it violently. My heart was pounding, and I looked at Ron. I could see fear in his eyes, but both of us were aware that we needed to head into harm's way. If anyone had been closer than we were, they could have been injured or killed. Our eyes were fixed on the bright white fire on the horizon, which scalded our retinas the closer we got. We shut off our siren as we approached, wanting to hear the cries of anyone who may have needed help. It didn't make sense for a meteor to be floating, but it was. I strained my eyes to look under the flames. It was no meteor, or if it was the strangest thing I'd ever heard of. I was looking at a four-sided, elongated prism. It was black as obsidian, but reflective, about 10 meters long from its base to its point. Each face of it was triangular, the base equilateral, and the 3 panels sprouting from it isosceles. It looked extremely heavy, but it must have been hollow in order to be floating. We circled it slowly, shining our high-beam flashlight into the water, searching for any signs of human activity. There were 3 lights approaching us quickly from the shore, and the small fleet arrived in no time. Over a loudspeaker, they called, "What are you doing here? This area isn't safe." "Hamilton Police," I called back, annoyed with his tone and slapping the side of the boat to show him the decal. "This area isn't safe. You need to leave now." "Who are you?" I asked him. "We know it isn't safe. We're here looking for survivors." "There was no one in the area at the time of the impact. This object is giving off toxic levels of radiation. For your own health and well-being, you need to leave. This is an RCMP research vessel." The man on the opposing boat lowered his floodlight to show his own decal, and sure enough, it seemed legit. What was more alarming was that upon closer inspection, everyone aboard that research vessel did indeed appear to be wearing some heavily leaded attire. My adrenaline cranked up a notch as I imagined what they were saying was true. "Alright, let's just get out of here," Ron conceded to me quietly, and we traveled at full speed back to base. It was a quiet night in the harbor otherwise, and when our shifts came to an end, we went to a nearby bar to get some shots. The mood was pretty somber, and neither I nor Ron said much. This place had a patio, and we had a beautiful view of the midnight lake. I looked for the white fire, but I couldn't see it anymore. Perhaps they put it out, or perhaps it was behind some obstacle. There was a jitter in the air. Something was uncomfortable. There was the sound of bustle, and the occasional scream, as you would expect in a bar area. But as the minutes went by, it seemed to become more intense. I found it difficult to keep track of what was going on around me. "Do you think we were actually poisoned?" Ron asked nervously. He had his phone out on the table in front of him, and he was tapping out some Metallica drumline. He always nervously twiddled his fingers when he was thinking, whether that was on his phone, his belt buckle, or his vest. "I don't know. Couldn't have been more than a couple x-rays." I tried to cheer him up, but really having no idea myself. I didn't have any symptoms, but I knew radiation sickness was something that could take time to come on. I wasn't the type to go to the hospital unless it became blaringly obvious that I needed to. The murmurs and the screams broke out louder than ever before. There were people running down the street, fleeing from something. I stared intently, trying to get some measure of what was going on, and rose to my feet. 2 women ran by in the street right in front of me. A strange-looking trio of people followed close behind them. There were 2 men and 1 woman. They were completely nude and pale. Their faces looked completely expressionless as they sprinted, and although they appeared to be running near top speed, they were moving very slowly. With impetus, a group of pursuers I had not seen collided with the strange trio. I recognized them as the men from the boats claiming to be the RCMP. They were wielding hatchets and bowled the strange people onto the ground before hacking them to pieces. I reached for my gun, eyes wide watching the horrors unfold. The air was so full of screaming, strangely enough, not from the people being murdered, but by witnesses now being pursued by other members of the people who claimed to be the RCMP. There was no way these people were the National Police. They opened up manhole covers and started dragging the bodies of the murdered folk into the sewers. Although the bodies didn't look human anymore, they looked like lizards. I looked over to my partner, trying to figure out what action to take, as all around me, other witnesses were being dragged into the sewers after the bodies. Suddenly, I felt dizzy. I lost balance and fell to the floor. Our bartender was holding Ron's lifeless body by the armpits and dragging him towards the door. We had been drugged. I tried to fight for consciousness a little longer, but then succumbed. The pressure in my head was unbearable as I woke up on my knees with my hands tied behind my back. We appeared to be in some sort of cave deep underground. It was unbearably hot. Air from thermal vents below me came wafting up, distorting my view of space. I was one in a row of people on their knees, and in front of me were two more rows. It looked like it was only a matter of time until we would be executed. The majority of the captives were still. Their heads hung low, unconscious, but there were others like me, swaying from the pressure in their heads and softly moaning their agonies. I didn't feel the need to sway, but I did so as not to draw attention to myself. Ron was to my left and he was out cold. In the center of the room were 3 green lizard people on their knees. Their hands were tied behind their back as well. They almost looked human in their facial features, but they clearly had scales and tails. The green lizards were only about 5 feet tall, and they were surrounded by 8-foot-tall red lizards that stood upright and indeed had tails and scales as well. The captors were speaking in a language I had never heard before, and yet understood. It was a form of growling, but it contained complex pitches and clicking.
This transgression cannot be excused. You were forbidden from returning to this solar system. But you managed to sneak in, didn't you? And now here you come, crashing into the planet. You have not been welcome here for 60 million years.
2 of the red lizards tilted back the heads of 2 of the green. From 2 of the 3 fingers on their hand sprouted 5-inch-long hypodermic needles. They looked like retractable nails, but much sharper, and they appeared from nothing. The red lizards shoved the needles into the underjaw of the green, who started snorting and sputtering violently before dropping onto the ground dead. The remaining green lizard was trembling.
Go and tell your king that if we catch another one of your ships in this star cluster, there will be war.
They cut the cords that bound him, and he scampered off, blending into the wall like a chameleon. The red lizard that was in charge turned to the other 3.
Fix the humans, will you? I've got work to do.
In another moment, he vanished, blending into the rock wall himself and his 3 subordinates, each extended a nail. They approached the front row of humans and extended their hypodermic needles deep into their necks, injecting them with something. Just after injection, the humans fell to the ground, but it wasn't clear whether or not they had died. Nevertheless, I was terrified, and I knew I had little chance of escape. For all I knew, I was kilometers below the surface of the earth, and even if I broke away from these lizards, I had nowhere to run. The first row of humans had received their treatment, and now the second row was being worked on. A thought came to me, one last desperate attempt to survive. I varied up my swaying and feigned convulsions, and when the second row of humans was face first on the floor and a red lizard was standing just to my right, I put on the performance of my life, rolling my eyes back in my head. I felt the needle enter my neck, and that's when I made my move. With a snort and a deep sway, I turned my head sharply to the right, impaling myself deeper onto the needle until I felt it poke out the back of my neck. I could feel the cold liquid it was dispensing running down my back, and I knew I'd succeeded. My captor didn't seem to notice, and after he retrieved his nail, I dropped onto my face convincingly. I must not have avoided the full dose though, because that part wasn't fully acted, and in less than a minute I had lost consciousness. I awoke in my bed, and the whole ordeal felt like a dream, but I remembered it clearly, and I knew it had not been. As soon as I fully woke up and came to my senses, I called Ron. If they had returned me to my bed, then it wasn't likely that they killed the other humans. "Hey, how you doing?" I was speaking to cheerful Ron, apparently. "Ron, are you okay? What happened last night? Do you remember it?" "Yeah, it was quite a bender, wasn't it? Gotta remind myself not to go drinking with you." I remembered then that Ron had been unconscious for much of what I saw. "Do you remember the thing that fell in the lake, Ron? Do you have any symptoms of radiation sickness?" There was silence on the other end of the phone. "Are you feeling okay, Jesse?" Ron asked coldly in a voice I'd never heard before. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Good. I'll be by in the squad car in 5 minutes. Our shift starts in half an hour, you know." Ron hung up the phone, and 5 minutes later he was outside my door, looking in my window. He hadn't even rung the bell, but I had been watching him through the peephole, and when he finally did ring my bell, he just stood there, expressionless, arms at his sides. I'd been late before, and I'd seen the way he stands there when he's waiting for me. He always taps on his vest. His hands weren't even in his pockets this time. They were just hanging there awkwardly. If you're hearing this now, I know I wasn't supposed to see what I saw, and I don't know what to do now. Hey guys, thanks for listening to that story. I left it a bit open-ended in case anybody wanted a sequel, so let me know if you do. I was thinking this might not be a bad one to have like an actual direct sequel, which I don't usually do. I also got a few suggestions for creatures to write stories about last week. I've been mulling those over and I haven't really come up with a unique way to tell the story yet, but I'm still thinking about it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more original creepypastas every Thursday. And until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.